Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Nadia and today's video is going to be about my recent reads from July to September. I'm gonna have my Goodreads list open because I read some books in hard copy and I read some books as ebooks, so just to make sure I get through all of them, I'm gonna make sure I have my Goodreads challenge list open, which I did actually in the last few months. I beat my Goodreads challenge. I read 50 books. Right now I'm up to 61 books. So I finished my challenge and I have surpassed it. So I'm really proud of myself for that. But yeah, so if you see me looking down, looking at my phone, that's why. It's because I am consulting the list. And the first book that I'm going to talk about is Sweet Bean Paste by Dorian Tsukegawa, and this is a short book that is translated from the Japanese. We have a down on his luck guy who, and I have forgotten all of the names. Let me actually look real quick because that's not Sentaro. Yes, we have Sentaro, who is a down on his luck ex-con who works at a stall making these little pancakes with sweet bean paste in the middle of them, and I can't remember what they're called. Goodness gracious, I've forgotten everything about this book. It's been a while. I read this in July. Dorayaki. He makes dorayaki, which are little pancakes filled with sweet bean paste, and he uses a store-bought sweet bean paste and doesn't really think much about it. But one day this elderly disabled woman shows up and begs him for a part-time job, and it turns out that she can make sweet bean paste from scratch, and it's the most delicious sweet bean paste that Sentaro has ever tasted. So he hires her, and her name is Tokue. She goes on to teach him how to make sweet bean paste from scratch. And this book sort of follows Tokue's life, how she came to be disabled, how she came to be so skilled at making sweet bean paste and things like that. Books with Emily Fox said that this book made her feel like she was the Grinch, and I kind of have to agree. It's quite a bleak book. I wasn't expecting it. I was expecting something more heartwarming, looking at the cover, and it was quite a bit more bleak than I was expecting. Trigger warnings for suicidal ideation. Yeah, so it was more sad overall than I thought it would be. But it was interesting to learn about Tokue and her life and what she had been through. So it was like a 3.5, no, a solid 3 stars for me. It was all right, but it wasn't an emotional gut punch like I expected after I started getting into it. Like when I realized that it was sadder than intended, it still didn't have like a big impact on me, and I feel like the Grinch saying that, and I think if you read this book you'll understand. But yeah, it's definitely a 3 stars for me, and I liked it, but I didn't love it very much. The next book I read, and I have this here actually, it's another book translated from the Japanese. It's called Days at the Morisaki Bookshop, and we have our main character Takako. Again, I've forgotten everyone's name. We have our main character, Takako. She's 25 years old, and she works at this company and is seeing this guy named Hideaki. And right at the beginning of this book, it turns out, she finds out that this entire time she's been dating Hideaki, she's been the other woman, and Hideaki has been dating someone else. And the book opens with Hideaki telling her that he's getting married to this someone else, but they can still see each other, which is gross. What an asshole. But yeah, so her life sort of falls apart. She realizes that the woman that Hideaki is intending to marry also works at the same company, and not being able to take this whole scenario, she quits her job. And after she quits her job, her uncle reaches out to her to ask her if she would like to come live atop his used bookstore in exchange for helping him out and working at the bookshop, so basically rent-free. She decides to take him up on his offer and moves into the apartment, and we sort of follow her as she falls in love with the bookstore and falls in love with reading. And it's a slice of life novel that sort of follows her on this journey as she sort of blooms in this new scenario and comes to be more sure of herself, a stronger person, etc. And then later on, Hideaki comes back into her life, and we see how she approaches the scenario from then on. There's a second half to this book with the uncle and his wife, which is, there's discussion of past trauma in that section, but overall I feel like this book was quite cozy. It was really slice of life. I really enjoyed it. It's very short, but also it's very beautiful. I love this cover. I hope that's in focus. I've noticed that I usually show covers and that they're not in focus, but I think that's in focus. But yeah, it's quite a beautiful cover. If you're looking for short books to kind of reach your reading goal this year, I would definitely say this should be one to have on your list, because it's nice and cozy and slice of life. Next, we have a graphic novel called The Princess and the Grilled Cheese Sandwich, and this is a great graphic novel that takes place in a world that is named, where everything is named after cheese. We have Lady Camembert, who wants to live a life on her own terms. She doesn't want to marry a guy. She wants to marry a woman if she ever gets married. And her father suggests that she disguise herself as a man and move to the city in order to live life on her own terms and be her own person. So Lady Camembert disguises herself as Count Camembert and moves to the city of Fromage to start over. But instead of living like a low-key life under the radar where she like never is really seen a lot outside of her house, she decides to enter society and meets Princess Brie and falls in love with her. And this is kind of their story about how, you know, of secret identities, of like pining for each other, of realizing who the other is, and like knowing that secret and not knowing what to do with it. And it's just like, it's an excellent, adorable graphic novel. It's absolutely gorgeous. The artwork is amazing. It's hilarious. I hope there's not a spoiler in any of those panels, but yeah, it's a beautiful, really funny, really heartwarming graphic novel. I highly recommend it. It's also a pretty quick read. I read it in one sitting, but like I went through over and over just looking at the art because it's gorgeous. Yeah, I highly, highly recommend this. There's also, if you need further, let's see if that comes in focus. There's a dog. I can't remember the dog's name, but it's definitely something cheese related. There's a lot of grilled cheese sandwiches in this too. I mean, who doesn't love cheese, even if you're lactose intolerant? My lactose intolerant friends say that cheese will be pried from their cold dead hands. So, I mean, cheese is, it's cheese. It's good. I recommend it. The next book, let's see. Oh, we have Under the Whispering Door by TJ Klune, which took me forever to read, and I couldn't really tell you why. I think it was because, well, we have Wallace, who right at the beginning of the book dies, and a Reaper comes to collect him and bring him to the, what is he called? Not the Highwayman. Oh, good lord, I can't remember. Anyway, he's brought to this cafe and tea shop where this guy named Hugo, who is a ferryman, that's the term, he is a ferryman. He's brought to this cafe and tea shop where Hugo the ferryman is supposed to help him transition into this new part of life, which is death, which, yeah, if you read this book, you'll get it. And this is sort of Wallace becoming, Wallace wasn't a good guy in his life, basically. He was a terrible person. He was a lawyer who was really cruel and mean to people, and after he dies, he sort of has this moment where he understands that he was not a great person, and he sort of starts to grow and evolve. And this book features a really great found family trope, which I think that TJ Klune is really good at, and Wallace, you know, becomes sort of this person who learns to care about others and care about himself and really come into his own, even though now he's dead. But it's a really heartwarming, touching story. It's a bit repetitive. There is a stylistic choice made where there are a lot of conversations between Hugo and Wallace that are somewhat similar in nature. I think that was why I sort of put it down, because there were quite a few of those conversations, but I think each of those conversations was beautiful in its own right, and I loved when it finally started picking up and what it turned out to be towards the middle and the end. And I think it's a great heartwarming story that really deserves some time and attention. Next is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, and this is a book about Sam and Sadie who meet as young kids in the hospital. Sam has been through a severe accident and is choosing or unable to speak, and Sadie bonds with him over video games, and Sam starts speaking to her, and thus she begins volunteering at the hospital and talking to Sam every day, and they become friends. And the book follows their life as they, fall apart as friends, come back together as friends as adults, and go on to make video games together. And it follows their life throughout, how they come together, fall apart, come together, fall apart, throughout their lives. And this book had so much hype, and I wanted to love it so much, and it's written absolutely beautifully. The prose, the writing, the narration, the characters, it's written beautifully, but I just didn't connect to the story. And I find it really odd because, as someone who's interested in video games, as someone who's interested in computer programming, as a user interface designer myself, there were a lot of elements to the story that were, that hit home. The way that Sadie is constantly undermined for credit for her work, and how hard it is to be a woman in the industry. I really felt like I should have connected with her character and the other characters more than I did, and I can't put my finger on why. But the story itself, it's written beautifully. For the writing alone, I would give it 5 stars, but personally, I didn't connect with it, and story-wise and how I enjoyed it, I would give it 3 stars. I don't think I gave ratings for the other books. Really quickly, Princess and the Grilled Cheese Sandwich was 5, Whispering Door is 4, Days at the Morisaki Bookshop is also 5. But yeah, Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow is like a 3-star read for me, and I already unhauled it. I didn't connect with the story as much as I felt I should, and I was really disappointed because it's just like super hyped, and yeah, I was just let down by it, unfortunately. Next we have, okay, this book I read for my local book club, and it's Ruth Ware's The It Girl. I don't really remember a lot about this, which is usually the case with me and thrillers, which is why I don't really read the genre very much. It's not that I don't really, I think thrillers are okay. For me, they're quick reads that are like popcorn reads and don't really stick with me very much, so I don't reach for them very often because it's not like a genre that I feel like I can personally sink my teeth into. And this book was about, I can't remember the main character's name. What was her name? I don't remember her name. Anyway, the It Girl is April, and we have our main character who is April's friend, and they went to college together, and April was murdered in her dorm room, and the main character gave evidence against a man who turned out to actually potentially not be the murderer, and he went to jail and, was adamant that he was innocent this entire time. And right at the beginning of the book, we find out that this man dies in jail, and our main character is sort of at this moment in her life where she's still questioning herself. Did she, finger the right guy? Did she put an innocent man in jail? She doesn't know. And because he dies, it sort of sets into motion these events where like a reporter contacts her and she's able to learn new things about the case, etc., etc., and it opens the case back up for her, and she goes on to investigate to try to find out what exactly really happened that night, how did April die, and who actually ended up killing her. And I thought it was enjoyable. Like I said, for me, it was a popcorn read. I read it in one sitting. It held my attention really well. The writing was pretty great. It had a lot of good twists and turns. It did have me guessing. I kind of knew who it was. I didn't know how the person did it, but I kind of knew that's the thing with thrillers. For me, I grew up reading R.L. Stine's Fear Street, like, pretty religiously. I read R.L. Stine's Fear Street, and I got pretty good at figuring out who, like, the killer, the murderer, the bad guy, whatever, was, like, in, like, the first 10 pages of the book. So with thrillers, I'm always just like, okay, who did it? Who did it? It's probably the person you least expect. Okay, da-da-da-da-da. And, like, I end up guessing who it is. So I knew who it could be, but I didn't know how it could be that person, which was interesting. To find out why it was that person, how it was that person, and for what reason they did it for was actually quite interesting. So it got me there, which usually books don't get me there. So thrillers don't get me there. So that was pretty great, and all in all, like, a 3-star book. Thrillers are usually like 3-star books for me. They're fine. I don't really think here or there about them, but this wasn't a bad read, and I did enjoy myself. So if you're into thrillers, I recommend it. It did really keep my interest, and it was twisty and turny enough that it did have me kind of guessing a little bit here and there. The next book we have is another graphic novel. This is The Prince and the Dressmaker. This is about a prince who likes to live as his alter ego, who wears dresses and goes to society events at night. And he calls himself Lady Crystalia. His alter ego is Lady Crystalia, and he meets this dressmaker. This dressmaker is named, oh Lord, I forget everyone's name, but okay, Prince is Prince Sebastian, and Francis is the dressmaker. So at the beginning of the book, Francis is a dressmaker in a dressmaker shop, and we have this customer that comes in who asks her, who isn't really interested in wearing a dress, but she has to get a dress for the prince's ball, and she says something like, "Make me the most ghastly thing you can think of. I want to, leave, I want to make sure nobody forgets me, but at the same time I really don't care. Make me something, the ugliest thing you can." And Frances, being a person who likes to give her customers what they want, does this, and the customer ends up loving the dress, but the dress itself is so out there that the head of the dressmaker shop is like, "Oh my god, Frances, you're fired. I can't deal with this. You completely ruined us." And while he's berating Frances, a man shows up at the door who says that he has a patron who is really interested in Frances and her dressmaking skills and wants to hire her. So Frances says, "Sure, I'll go get hired and do this dressmaking for this mysterious person." And the mysterious person turns out to be Prince Sebastian, who, as I've already said, likes to wear dresses and go out at night. And Frances becomes his personal dressmaker, and it's their journey as friends together, and how Frances grows as a dressmaker, comes into her own, and realizes what she needs to be fulfilled, and Prince Sebastian also realizes what he needs to be fulfilled, and it's a very low stakes, beautiful story. The artwork again is gorgeous. We have both of them, Prince Sebastian and Francis, and his alter ego, Lady Crystalia. It's just a great graphic novel. It's a lot more low stakes than Princess and the Grilled Cheese is, but still very worth a read. I would give this 4 stars. I thought it was great, and I gave it 4 stars. I knocked off a star because, like I said, there doesn't really feel like there's any stakes in this, but it's still quite a beautiful, wholesome, heartwarming story, and I do recommend it. The next book we have is Convenience Store Woman, and this was an interesting read for me. I've had quite a bit of time to sit with this, and I still don't know entirely how I feel about it. In this book, we have a 36-year-old woman, I believe, named Keiko, who is a part-time convenience store clerk, and she's been a part-time convenience store clerk, I think, since she was 17, which is quite a long time to be a convenience store clerk. And ooh, I think my battery is low. Something says 3 minutes. Anyway, let's see if I can get through all these books in the next 3 minutes. She is a convenience store clerk, and she finds a lot of her life's purpose in being a convenience store clerk, even though the people around her are like, you're 36 years old, why are you still a convenience store clerk? This isn't like a job for you. You should have a career and a husband and children and a home. Why are you like this? And I related quite a bit to that. Being someone who, I mean, I'm not really weird in this day and age as a childless ace millennial. I'm not that zoo animal-ish anymore. There are dozens of us. But I did relate to that aspect of Keiko, and I was rooting for her from that level to, you know, be okay with her purpose. If that's how she believes that her life has purpose and meaning and she likes doing what she does, to, you know, continue doing that and continue being herself. But at the same time, there is another character in here who is extremely irritating, who I couldn't stand. There is a point in the story where Keiko sort of can't take being observed or being seen as like this odd out there zoo animal, and so tries to correct herself and live life the way that other people think that she should. And that's where the story kind of lost me. It got me back in the end, which I'm grateful for, because it could have gone somewhere else and that would have been awful. But that whole portion of the story really didn't sit well with me. That main male character, or the secondary male character, just was incredibly irritating, and I would say incel-like. I didn't like him whatsoever. Overall, I think this book is like a 2.5 or a 3-star book. It's written very well. I liked Keiko's character, and overall I was rooting for her, and that's where the story kind of left me. I don't know, something about that secondary male character and where that story goes in that arc, in that section, just didn't sit well with me, and it made me, I mean, I think it was intended to be disturbing, but it just didn't sit right with me and kind of lost me there. So, like I said, 2.5, 3 stars, pretty okay. Apologies if the camera angle has changed. I had a situation with my memory card where it was like, I'm almost full and you have 0 minutes left on it, so I had to figure out what to delete. Anyway, the next book we have is The Song of Achilles, and this is the story of Achilles and Patroclus, and I am sorry if I have completely butchered that name, but that's how I'm gonna say it, and if it's not the way you say it, I'm extremely sorry for the next couple of minutes where I incredibly annoy you by saying it incorrectly. But it is their story of how they fall in love and what happens during the Trojan War, and it's heartbreaking and beautiful and very beautifully written. There are, I mean, it's a Greek myth retelling, so there are some disturbing aspects to the myth. I didn't really like the whole thing that happened with Achilles' mother. That wasn't a great section of the story to read. It was actually quite disturbing, so trigger warning for that. But the love story of Achilles and Patroclus is beautiful, and the ending I found, even though it's sad and heartbreaking, and I didn't cry. I thought I was gonna cry when I read this. I was hoping to cry. I was hoping for this like big cathartic release, but I didn't get there. It is still a lovely story, and I found the ending to be quite hopeful, and the writing is beautiful. And I know I've read this like a million years too late. Everybody and their mother has read this book, but also look at this edition. It's from Barnes & Noble. I don't know if they still have it, but it's like the anniversary edition, and it's beautiful. It's got the bow and arrow on the back. But yeah, I thought this was great. I gave it 5 stars. I'm looking forward to finally reading more by Madeline Miller. I don't know why. I've had this book as an ebook for years. I just never got around to it. I don't know why, because I think it's because I heard that it was so heartbreaking, and I wasn't really looking to read a story that would make me cry or that was heavy, but this isn't that heavy. It is quite sad though, but I did love it, and I gave it 5 stars. Next we have Even Though I Knew the End by C.L. Polk, and this is a very short science fiction fantasy novella that was amazing. We have, I forget everyone's name. I've forgotten everyone's name, but we have it's like a noir story, so we have our like detective character who at one point in her life sold her soul for reasons that we come to understand later, and she is working in Chicago as a small-time detective doing these supernatural cases for her patron, and one day her patron offers her or puts her on this case to to go after the White City Devil, who is a serial killer that is going around town killing people in very, very gruesome ways. And at first our detective is like, no way, I can't do this. But then the patron is like, well, what if it gets you your soul back? And being unable to resist that, she decides to take on the case and find out who the White City Killer is, all the while trying to protect her girlfriend, who has some secrets of her own. And this was excellent. It's a very short novella, like I said, but it packs a punch. There is a lot of story in here, and I believe it just won or was shortlisted for the Hugo, something with the Hugo Awards. I don't really pay attention to awards, but it is well deserved. This story is amazing, even though, I mean, the title, obviously, even though you know the end, while you're reading it, even though you know the end, it still doesn't hurt less, and it's just excellent. I love this, and I'm really interested to read more of C.L. Polk's work based on this. I got this at the Ripped Bodice in Brooklyn, and I'm very happy that I did. It was excellent. 5 stars. Next book we have is The Cat Who Saved Books. This is another book that I should have mentioned along with the other ones that is translated from the Japanese. In this we have a young boy whose name I've forgotten, who lives with his grandfather in their used bookshop, and right at the beginning of the book his grandfather passes away, and he doesn't really know what to do with himself in the aftermath of this. He has a long lost aunt who's like, we're gonna sell the store and you're gonna come live with me, and you know, we're gonna end this chapter of your life because there's no way a boy can run a used bookshop. But the boy is also, he's kind of a shut-in. He lives his life in books. He loves to read, and he rarely ever goes outside. And after losing his grandfather, he doesn't go outside to the point where he won't go to school, and his classmates start to worry about him, and they start dropping by to visit him to see why he's not coming to school, and he's just like, you know, I'll come tomorrow, and doesn't show up. And then one day, a cat appears, and this cat can talk. And this cat asks this boy to help him come with him and help him save some books. And thus the adventures in the book begin. We have a couple of adventures with this cat where our main character helps him to save books that are in these weird scenarios where they're being held captive in certain ways. And later on, one of the classmates who has been visiting him also gets involved in these adventures, and we see how our main character grows and comes into his own as a person. It's a coming of age story kind of where he sort of learns that he shouldn't really be living life shut away inside of the used bookstore. He needs to have some courage and realize that there are people that care about him and that there are people he can care about, and he should engage with life, etc. And it's a beautiful story, and it really reads like, I think this is used pretty liberally these days, but it really does read like a Ghibli movie or an animated movie of some sort. It's really beautiful. I had a lot of fun reading it. It kind of lost me at the end. I thought the ending was a little weak, but the after the ending scene sort of made up for it. And I gave this 5 stars because I thought it was lovely. It's another short book. The theme of this seems to be a lot of short books. But if you are looking for books to add to your TBR to sort of get to your reading goal this year, I recommend this book wholeheartedly because it reads pretty quickly. Again, I read it in like a day, like 5 or 6 hours or something, and it was really touching and beautiful. So I read My Roommate is a Vampire, and it was okay. In this book, we have our main character named Cassie, I want to say. I think her name is Cassie, and she is a down-on-her-luck artist who, right at the beginning of the book, is being evicted from her apartment because she can no longer afford living there. She lives in Chicago. She works part-time as a barista and as a children's librarian, and she wants to make it big with her art, but she really doesn't know in what aspect she wants to do that. Like maybe she wants to be an art teacher, maybe she wants to be like a big artist with like a patron, etc. And so she's being evicted, and she goes to Craigslist to try to find another apartment, and she sees this listing for like this beautiful room in a really big apartment in like downtown Chicago where like it should be thousands of dollars, and this room is advertised for $200. So at first she's like, what the heck is this? This is weird, $200, it's probably a scam. Her friend Sam convinces her to go take a look at this place to see if it's for real. So she goes and she takes a look at this place, and the other person that's living there is someone named Frederick something Fitzwilliam. Frederick something Fitzwilliam. Can't remember his whole name. But so he just seems to be a bit eccentric. He dresses really elaborately like an old gentleman from like a bygone era, and he speaks very formally, and his house is kind of old-fashioned, but the room is big, and that's the rent he's asking for. So she decides to take the room, and of course later on she finds out that her roommate, Mr. Frederick Fitzwilliam, is a vampire. And the reason he is looking for, or he was looking for somebody to let this room, was because he needs to know how to live life in the modern day because, well, I don't want to spoil anything, but he needs to know how to live life in the modern day, and because he has no clue how anything works, and he barely knows how to text, he doesn't know what Wi-Fi is, he doesn't know what the internet is, he doesn't really know how to function at all in the modern day. So Cassie becomes his teacher and helps him sort of navigate the modern world, and yeah, they end up having a romance and falling in love, and that's the story basically. And I gave it 2.5 stars. It just felt like, so I believe, or I've heard, that the author of this book is a fanfic writer, which I have nothing against. I love fanfic. But this book reads like a certain kind of fanfic where it's like you reach the climax of the story, or the whole story is to reach a climax point, and then everything surrounding the story itself is like scaffolding. There isn't really a whole story there. There are pretend stakes that end up going nowhere, and none of the rest of the story, the B characters, the B plot, none of it matters. The only thing that matters is getting them from point A to point B, and everything else is just sort of not quite there. So this felt like a story that wasn't a complete story to me. It just felt like we want to get them from they don't know each other to they're completely in love, and that's the only thing that matters, and everything surrounding that is just fluff. So I think if you're looking for that kind of story, this is great. It was cozy in the sense that there's no stakes and it's just a cute romance. It's basically, it feels mean to say, but it's basically cotton candy. It's all sugar, no real substance, fluffy, soft, pretty to look at, but not really a lot of stories. So I gave it 2.5 stars because it didn't really do much for me, but I think that if you're looking for something that's low stakes, that's cozy, that's just a simple love story, you will like this. It's quite, the fish out of water aspect with Frederick is quite funny. There are some moments where it's like, haha, yeah, of course, you know, like he buys her an entire Le Creuset cooking set because he realizes that he doesn't have any pots and pans for her, and he doesn't know what pots and pans are, and he doesn't know what pots and pans get used for cooking, so he just goes out and he buys her an entire Le Creuset set with like all the trimmings, like every pan under the sun. So that was amusing. But like I said, it just cotton candy for me. 2.5 stars. I think Mel Reads gave this book 5 stars, which like I said, it totally depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking for fluff, this is the fluffiest story I've read this year. Yeah, so 2.5 stars. I do recommend it if you're looking for something silly, light, and fun to read. Next we have A Taste of Gold and Iron, and I loved this book. We have Prince Kadu, which I'm sorry if I am butchering that, but we have Prince Kadu, who is the prince of the Arasht Empire, and at the beginning of this novel, what's going on is that someone is counterfeiting coins, and the Arasht Empire's entire base is on gold, and how solid their money is, how it doesn't go up or down with inflation. There's never, like, the gold is never cut with anything. You can always rely on Arashti coin for being, you know, the gold standard. Like, it's always good money, and we have somebody counterfeiting coins, and that is like, oh no, someone's counterfeiting coins, our reputation, and so we have that happening. And then we also have Prince Kadu is sort of having a rivalry with his sister, who is the Sultan. His sister's not her husband, but someone, I guess her consort, you would say. He is the father of her daughter, but in this world, the fathers don't really matter. They're known as body fathers, and they don't really have any claim on the children. The children belong to the mother. So I would say that he is the prince's consort, and the prince and he have a embarrassing misunderstanding that results in Prince Kadu's status and stature as prince sort of falling in reputation, and he ends up getting this new bodyguard, and this new bodyguard is supposed to keep him safe and keep him basically quiet and away from the rest of the court. And basically they sort of go from enemies to lovers. There is his bodyguard goes from thinking that he is like this negligent, flighty prince who doesn't really know what he's doing to sort of understanding him, and same goes for the prince. He starts to understand that his bodyguard is not this like statue without feelings. He starts to understand him as well, and they come to this mutual understanding and go from enemies to lovers. And there is adventures with the counterfeiting, and there is touch tasting, which apparently is something where certain members of the empire, including Prince Kaido himself, can touch coins and feel that they're off. Like they can see that the gold is, or feel, not see, but literally feel with their fingertips that the gold is contaminated and therefore wrong in some way. There is swashbuckling and romance and adventures and found family and just a whole bunch of tropes, a whole bunch of romance book tropes that are just very indulgent and hilarious and perfect and wonderful. And I loved this story. The world building in this is, I liked the world building in this, but it is quite a lot of detail, especially in the beginning. Like they throw out the term body father and I was like, what in the world is that? But they do end up explaining what that is. And touch tasting and marriages, and there's other kingdoms, and it's a bit confusing, but the main part of the story is the relationship between Prince Kaido and Evamir, and I thought that was written really, really, really well. Like I said, it's very tropey, very indulgent, very hilarious. The relationships that all of Prince Kaido and all of his guards have together is just the cutest thing. Even in the face of danger, their relationships with each other are just so heartwarming and cute and just hilarious. Very funny. There are some really ridiculous, tropey, funny moments in this that are just like I said, very indulgent. I thought this book was excellent. I gave it 5 stars. I had an extremely fun time. I read this, it's a pretty chunky book. I read it in like, I want to say 8 or 10 hours because I couldn't put it down. I loved it from start to finish. I gave it 5 stars. I know some people don't really like this book, but I loved it and I highly recommend it if you're looking for more romantasy this year. It was great. Editing Nadia here to say that I forgot to mention that Prince Kaido is also somebody who suffers from severe anxiety, and this book handles that really, really, really well. As someone who suffers from anxiety myself, it was somewhat hard to read, but it made a lot of sense, and it was just an aspect that made his character feel a lot more real and a lot more well-rounded, and I really love that aspect of the story as well. Yeah, let's get back to the video. And the last book we have is, I just read this yesterday, so today is October 1st, so coming in under the wire on September 30th, we have The Secret Lives of Country Gentlemen, and this is a story about Gareth and Joss. We have Gareth Inglis, who was abandoned as a child by his father. He lived with his uncle who didn't really want him, and at the beginning of the story, his father, who was a baronet, dies and leaves the baronetcy to Gareth because Gareth is his only male heir. So Gareth has to move to this place called Rowan Marsh. I think it's called Rowan Marsh. It's definitely a marsh, but I think it's called Rowan Marsh. So he has to move to this place called Rowan Marsh and take over the mansion that's there, and he learns things about how his father conducted his life there. So it turns out he has a half-sister that he didn't know about, and the half-sister didn't know about him, and he meets his father's mistress, who was also his late wife's sister. scandal. And yeah, so that's what's going on with Gareth and his life. Then we have Joss Doomsday, who is the leader of the Doomsday smuggling clan, who operates out of Rowan Marsh and is sort of in this gray area with the law, where the law knows that, you know, they should hang, but at the same time they all want their brandy and they all want their silk and they all want their lace. So as long as they can get that, they're kind of okay with letting the smuggling go on. This takes place, I don't really know in terms of years, but it's taking place during the war between England and France. So that's why things like brandy and French silk and French lace, etc., is being smuggled around this time. So how these two characters are linked to each other is that in the beginning of this book, Gareth and Joss are meeting up in London, are having an affair in London, and they don't know each other's names. So Gareth calls himself London, Joss calls himself Kent, because Gareth is from London, Joss is from Kent, and they have this short affair where they really catch feelings for each other, but then Kent, Joss, says that he has to go back home, and Gareth, who is somebody who has a lot of issues with abandonment, sort of pushes Joss away, and Joss is like, well, no, I don't mean I'm going away forever, I can come back, or I will come back, and Gareth is like, no, you won't come back, just, I'm cutting this off, and I'm pushing you away before you can push me away, and I don't want to wait around for you because you're never going to come back, and blah blah blah, and I don't want to get my hopes up, etc. So he pushes him away, and they sort of end up falling apart. And then Gareth finds out his father dies, so he goes to this place called Rowan Marsh in Kent, where it turns out that Joss Doomsday is a smuggler, and there are several plot elements in the story which end up bringing them together, and they sort of can't stay apart from each other even though they need to, but they like each other too much, so they keep coming together. There's elements in the story that keep bringing them together, and yeah, there is a lot of action in this, a lot of adventure. There is a great central mystery, and there is, you know, Gareth and Joss falling in love. There's a murder, there's several murders, there is a sunken treasure, there is lots of, the book says on the back, skullduggery, danger, and murder most foul, which, yes, all of those things. I thought it was really, really great. I loved the action adventure portion of this. The love story was okay. I thought, you know, it was pretty romantic, but at the same time it was a little cheesy for me, so I ended up giving this book 4 stars, but I really loved the actual, like, the murder, the mystery, the hunting for buried treasure, all that stuff was excellent. It was a really great adventure, and I think, yep, that is the last book. I'm currently reading Payback's a Witch, and really enjoying it, but that's for the next video, I believe. That is all the books that I read between July and September. I hope that this was interesting. I hope that you were able to learn something, and I hope that you find some books that you are now interested in reading. So yeah, I will see you in the next video. Bye.